Welcome to the Better Business Podcast. I'm your host, Austin Zelan. Join me week after week as I interview high-level entrepreneurs on their journey to success, both in business and personal development. Each week presents new stories to learn from and new ideas on how to run a better business. Stay updated with all the guests we'll have by subscribing to this podcast. Alrighty, guys, welcome to another episode of Better Business with Austin Zelan. I have our guest, Danny Trejo, here with me today, and we're going to talk about his fitness business. So I'm super excited to have you here. Thank you for joining me. Let's go ahead and get started with a little bit of your background and how you got to where you are currently. So were you an entrepreneur your entire career, or maybe you started out in a corporate job? And can you tell us a little bit more about your story?
Absolutely will. So a small town, Texas, actually, town of 6,000 people. So I wouldn't say that entrepreneurship was something that was top of mind ever in my life. Reaching for the stars in that sense wasn't really an option in a small town. At least it wasn't available to us. Yeah. And I've decided to go to school, Texas State, right here around the area. Went to school for microbiology. So always been a fan of science. But right out of school, it was one of those things like, I don't know how to make money, right? So I'll go do sales, right? And I'm glad I did that, actually. Completely different approach. I'm actually an introvert, so going down this sales path really opened me up in understanding how to communicate with others, and I wouldn't say structured, but a little bit more framework conversations, right? Like, what am I trying to get out of this conversation? And so I learned a lot through that process. Eventually got into marketing and ended up at Apple doing marketing for them over there in the European division. So what the transition happened right there, about 26 years old, 27. I had a personal tragedy in the family and had one of those moments of really rethinking how I felt about, everything, myself, what I wanted to do, how was I affecting others, what is the point of life, all those existential questions you ask yourself. And then when you have those few rare moments in your life, and decided to just quit Apple. I lived off my savings for a while and just thought about what I wanted to do. I was out of shape. I was poor mental health. I wouldn't say they worked me hard over there, but there's a certain level of like trying to climb the ladder. So you hit those 80, 100-hour weeks sometimes just trying to get it in, finish projects and such. So I just all right, I'm gonna change my health. I'm gonna go back to what I used to do when I was younger. I'm gonna get back into my health and wellness, get into fitness, and use a little bit of that microbiology that I love so much from school. So I decided just to certify as a trainer, just honestly on a whim, just for fun. I didn't think it was gonna be a career path or anything. I was like, this will be fun. I started working out a lot, and then I was starting to think, maybe I'll just be a trainer on the side right now while I figure out what I want to do in my future, because I need something to do. I'm just not doing anything on a day-to-day basis besides work out and eat healthy. And when I became a personal trainer, I decided to try out 24-hour fitness as how does this world work, right? I need to understand how do onboarding work, finding clients, all that stuff. And I was at 24-hour fitness for 7 months. Wasn't that long? 6 or 7 months. Very short time frame. But I realized right away a few things. One, people in this industry did not know how to sell, at all. And I think people have that understanding of sales is icky and gross and was it like car salesman kind of thing mentality? Yeah. So there's that. And realized that that side of marketing yourself just didn't exist at all. So you know what? I have the skills that I need now. I understand how the training world operates. I'm going to go ahead and start working. Start my first business, which I did right there, 27 years old. And it was working with downtown properties. So the first company was holistically trained. And what I do essentially was I would create partnerships, agreements with the downtown corporate buildings. So the Frostbane Tower is a pretty famous building down here. It was my first contract. And I always supply them personal trainers to the property. So they had access to that service. And then I would just do that building to building. And we did that for a few years. And after the few years, I don't remember how long ago that was. My friend / coworker who was managing the team, we just realized, we had a long conversation about how we just couldn't seem to scale past the 7 fitness professionals mark. It was just we're getting stuck there. And this was 6 years ago. So Austin downtown wasn't near as big as it is now. We didn't have half the office buildings we do now. So we just kind of hit a wall. And we're like, we need to rethink this. And my buddy was getting burnt out. So we decided to call it quits. We just let it all go. I went solo again for about 6-8 months, a year, because that's when the pandemic hit. And thanks to my marketability as a professional, I was just getting hundreds of requests when the pandemic hit, because people found me online really easily. They lost their personal trainer. They lost access to the facility that they were in, obviously. There's a lot there going on. So I was like, I already have a full schedule. So maybe I can start the old model in a new way with the going to someone's homes instead, like going to people's homes, apartment buildings. I was like, let's just open this up, right? So on the business side, pretty straightforward, just kind of expanded into that, traveling to people's directly to them during the pandemic. And then we kind of continue to do that after, of course, the pandemic ended and we were going back to the main buildings. But yeah, honestly, on the business side, that was it. There's a lot more to our protocol and our approach that I would love eventually to get into. But there's essentially, yeah, so that's kind of where we got here, essentially. Yep.
Okay, cool. And so now basically you're supplying these trainers to corporate office buildings.
Mhm.
Or was that pre-pandemic?
That was pre-pandemic, yes. Yes, that was pre-pandemic.
Okay, and how has that shifted to be where it's at now?
Yeah, so we realized it was just on a lot more management when we worked partnership with the buildings. There was a lot more engaging with the property manager, like Endeavor, whatever the real estate group was. We just managing with them and trying to get them to promote our services to the offices was a lot more work than we realized. If instead of we just brought in the leads ourselves through our website, through contact forms or type forms and whatnot, realized if we shifted to that, then it was much easier to manage versus being like, okay, Frostbank Tower, this is what we're doing, this is what we have available, what new renters do you have in your building now? How do we reach out to them? How do you connect us to them, right? Because we weren't allowed to directly, of course, approach them.
Definitely.
So we realized we just cut that part out completely and then just market, localize like YouTube ads instead to the downtown Austin market. And that was way easier connecting directly to the consumer versus, going through that third party.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. And so how are you finding these trainers? Like, are you just like, where do you even find a personal trainer to add to your team?
Yes, that's
that seems like a challenge.
That is the challenge, as I'm sure every single person listening to this, if you operate a business, hiring is the most difficult part. And I have to admit that I didn't realize that was going to be the largest hurdle in this industry. Because as you can imagine, I don't want to stereotype too much. And if you're a trainer, I don't mean to offend you, but a lot of people come into this industry thinking it's like, it's easy path. It's not, it can't be that complicated, or I'm only going to work part-time, or these, that mindset. And I have to do a lot of filtering to the interview process. I mean, I'm using LinkedIn or just word of mouth, or honestly, sometimes I will go get a membership at a facility myself and go, hire a personal trainer and see like, is this person any good, right? So I'm trying all different avenues, and essentially we're looking for our specific qualities, like are they passionate? Do they have integrity? Do they have fortitude, right? And there is a reason is that developing or finding these individuals is so difficult. And mostly because we're not, even though I said we're just a personal training company, that is kind of how we pitch it to most people, but we're more of what's called a corrective fitness brand. It's a brand I developed years ago. And what we do is essentially imagine what a PT does with rehab, connects that with personal training, and we merge them together. So if someone even has like low back pain, knee pain, whatever, we will correct that through our programming. And even if you don't have that, we make sure to prevent that from ever happening. So that approach is really, takes a lot of understanding on a biological scale. There's a lot of technical approaches to it, and there's a lot of continuing education. And I noticed very early on that a lot of trainers couldn't handle the amount of education we're shoving down their throat every week by week. And we still do, by the way. It's with my current team, every single week we have multiple meetings a week on what else do we need to learn on the certain current modalities that exist in the marketplace. How do we learn that? How do we apply that to the sessions? So hiring has been by far the most difficult part. And it does take several rounds of interviews and just filtering for at each stage a different filtering process, right? Versus, it's like the virtues I brought up before. After we filter for that, we look like, okay, well, how does this person, what do they want long-term out of a career, right? And does that align with us? And I'm a big believer in not asking the direct questions, like, how can we help you? I think that's a little, they know how to dance around that versus if money wasn't an option, what would be your next, what would be your perfect final path in your career, and seeing like where's their mind land up on that, and seeing if that does fit with our vision long term. And finally, just are they personable? Like the last one's always in person. It's always us hanging out at a coffee shop or something, just having a conversation. And everyone knows, like, as you can imagine, this career choice, you have to have some level of charisma. Otherwise, it doesn't matter how good you are. And I've known some great trainers, master degrees, doctorate degrees, and just couldn't retain a single person because they just weren't charming. No one liked being around them, right? So that last step was really important as well. But
that's interesting. Yeah. I would imagine that a lot of personal trainers don't necessarily want to work for a business as well. Maybe they just want to be freelancers, and they're like, oh, I'm doing this because I want to be my own boss. Do you run into that a lot?
Absolutely. That was one of the couple of main hurdles. Going into this, I already knew, when anyone starts a business plan, they're like, okay, what do I think would be the biggest problems that we run into, right? And how do I go ahead and mitigate that now? And I knew that was going to be that one right away. It was, okay, once they have the clients, what's stopping them from just running away with the clients? Right?
Yeah, exactly.
So
Did you have that happen?
Honestly, it has not happened directly. It wasn't like I had these clients and I'm going to run. It was more of they were already feeling like they were being overworked or like there was some kind of conflict, and then they decided to leave, and then they kept the clients. Right? I haven't seen it yet where it was intentional, which is great because I do try a lot to understand and see the value in working in this business. Of course, one is the level of value that's been brought to these professionals they have to know that the only thing they have to think about is how good they are at their technical skill set, right? Yeah. That's it. They don't even have to bring on clients. They won't have to do any payment processing. They don't have like all the marketing, all the content behind everything that's done behind the scenes. They don't have to touch it. They don't have to think about it. Sometimes I'll ask their advice or opinions, but that's about it. And they just think about how well they're doing with the client. So for most people, that is a huge win. So there's that. The other one is we pay twice the national average for the going rate on their rates, right? So we do 54% of a session rate is what they get. When even places like the luxurious Equinox gym they only get 30% at most for a master level trainer of the session rate. So a huge difference, and that's the entrance level. They get that right away. And so we knew we paid well enough that the margin that they're missing out on, they realized it wouldn't be worth it to leave and then lose that marketing ability and all the background. And, we cover fees and other license certifications. We cover all that, right?
Yeah.
So there's just too much value there to run away from, right? Yeah. So we definitely haven't seen anybody just run away yet and want to start their own thing intentionally. It's usually just a natural parting of ways because of some kind of conflict.
Yeah. Awesome. No, I love that. I think you really thought it through well, and you have definitely a strategy to retain your talent. So that's cool. Props to you. Now, as you were growing your business, what would you say was one of the biggest challenges besides hiring? Were there any other things that really you were like, man, how do I solve this? Or how do I get past this?
I want to say that, that's most weeks. I can't think of anything in a massive mountain currently. There is, actually, I lied. I was just talking to Alaric about this, our mutual friend, the other day. I have made the mistake these past couple of years thinking that I could have this team of trainers and I could grow them and have some kind of upward mobility inside the company. It's like, okay, there are trainers. Maybe at one point they can start to teach other trainers and become a management and then move over into helping me operationally or whatnot. And even though there has been about one that's done decent at that upward growth, the skill set is so vastly different than where they were to where they go next that it just has not worked at all. Every single time we've attempted to grab them more responsibilities, you can imagine these people only need 17, 18 sessions a week. That's about 25 to 30 hours of work. So they can easily put another 10 to 15 hours of work easy onto their schedule. So they decided I want to keep doing this, but take on more responsibilities, earn more of a salary, that kind of. And as we've attempted that, the skill gap is just too high. So for those management positions, I've just had to hire in directly someone who's already skilled at that exact position versus hiring upward mobility. And that was something it took me far too long to learn is that sometimes you just don't have a position where they can't grow upwards, right? Mm-hmm. So that kind of makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. No, I think there's definitely certain businesses like that where it's just a clear separation, like for example, if there's I don't know what a good example, maybe like a mechanic shop, you got the guys fixing the cars and you got the guys running the business, maybe they could transition from one to the other, but it's just such a vastly different skill set that I don't think it even makes sense. So no, definitely understand that. Now, when it comes to growing your business, was there ever a specific strategy, like maybe YouTube ads or Facebook ads, or maybe something else that allowed you to grow your business? Sometimes for people, it's an advertising type of thing. Sometimes it's, we created such an incredible offer that our business doubled, or we brought on the right people, or what was that for you?
That is what I've always considered to be my competitive advantage. A slight side note that answers your question is I'm a big believer in trying to figure out what are your personal advantages in life as a human, as a person, as an individual. What is my personal skill set? Right? Yeah. From where I'm from, my father is just an old school cowboy. Legitimately every weekend, I had to go to the ranch and work on the fence. I was like, just cuz. And I asked him, I was like, oh, we're going to get paid for this? Because my cousin owned a fencing company. He's like, no. The work is what you get out of it. And just had to work for work's sake. Right. So I knew that the work ethic has just always been really high. Toxically, where I'm like, why am I doing this? Yeah. So there's that. But the other advantage I learned later in life was the marketing aspect. I'm like, how do I beat my competition? It's like, well, do the thing that they probably none of them have, was being, working at marketing at a high level. And so would do like specific strategies. Like your classic one that I highly recommend is always being you rank organically on any search engine, right? Google search engine. Yeah. So if they look up anything that's related to my industry, I want to make sure that I'm the one educating them with our resources. So focus on that. But then little things like, where is your perfect demo hanging out, right? Like this is a classic avatar question, like how building out your avatar. And we do things, and surprisingly has worked better than anything else, is we just donate to the charities around Austin. And we always donate a package. We're like, hey, here's 7 sessions, here's 10 sessions. Because every single person who always buys those packages are of a higher income, and they're usually female. Because our demo is 35 to 45-year-old exec females. And they are that charities. They're usually more philanthropic than men are. And they buy these packages. And it's just, that was probably one of the, I don't want to call it hack per se. I'm not usually a fan of that term, but that is like the easiest hack I've noticed, is just really thinking about your audience. And that helped us scale pretty quickly for really not a lot of cost, because it's really just the loss of whatever I'm paying the professional, right? Yeah. That's it for those 7 to 10 sessions.
Yeah. No, definitely. I think that's a great strategy. Now, when it comes to company culture, you have a bit of a different structure because you got your management team, your executives, and then you have the actual personal trainers who are going in and doing the sessions. So is there some sort of culture between the two, or would you say they have their own organizational culture?
So the question is the culture between the team and what else?
So your executive team and the team going out and doing the training. Do you feel that they interact enough to have a culture together, or do you have your own like mini organization just with the trainers?
Yes, it is unfortunately separate.
Yeah.
No, it's actually been, it has been great. So on the executive side, it's very strong culture. We talk to each other regularly, every single day. The mission and the value has been easy to develop with them. They understand it on the back end, and like how we've adapted to the marketplace, especially in Austin, great market for us. When it comes to the training team, some of those bigger picture don't really, the linear path is harder to see sometimes, right, on the training team. So the culture is a bit more difficult there. And since we are a remote team, mostly remote team, we do meet in person a couple of times a week. But it's the culture is a little bit more tentative, is a little more sensitive to managing that directly because of that. Sometimes the vision is lost because of what their day-to-day is, and they don't want to interact with the rest of the team seeing the bigger picture. Yes. So that has been very difficult, and it really just requires more, just further attention and more one-on-ones. I noticed that just doing the easy, good old-fashioned management style of doing a one-on-one and seeing where they're at works really well for the training team versus the exec team. So that's a really simple thing that I didn't expect to work so well. Just listening, paying attention, knowing where their goals are at, seeing how they're feeling about the people they're working with, or how their life is personally going, has yielded wonders far more than I ever saw when I worked in the corporate world. In the corporate world, it's more like, yeah, I'm good, yeah. like they just kind of like placate. So it's like, just kind of, they feel like they're being sometimes patronized. But with the training team, no, it's very, very effective. Taking time and pulling them away and just listening to where they're at in life and kind of where they want to be. And that's pretty much it.
Yeah. So you have a personal relationship with each one of these people.
Yes. And it is an important element. It's not obviously not scalable, yeah, but it is an important element thus far on that. And until, it's just an important element. I think that touch has been something that is, in this industry, there's a very high churn rate when it comes to these professionals, personal trainers. And in order to overcome that hurdle that no one else has figured out, and they have to do things that no one else is willing to do, which has been one-on-one time with each of them.
Definitely. Now, as you scale, obviously you wouldn't be able to spend time personally with all these people. So do you have a plan or like a team in place that maybe could start taking on some of that?
There is a plan. There is a plan to have more of a culture building aspect. The idea here is when I'm investing on them one-on-one, there's obviously value there. I'm running the company, I have the vision, I've been building this out. So there's an inherent value. In the future, let's say if there's just as an example, if it's just a manager that I bring in or something, or someone operationally, then it's not as valuable just meeting with them. They're just, they're not, but they seemingly feel like a cog in the machine, right? So it's like, well, this is just meeting with you isn't exciting. What I have to be is they have to really learn how to develop from each other. And this is gonna be the most difficult part running a virtual system here, where we're all remote, we're bouncing around different places of Austin, and hopefully expand here soon to San Antonio. That the program, the idea essentially is to bond with each other, of course, as you would with most cultures, but it's tricky because we don't have location like the building we're in currently, where everyone's working next to each other and you get to bounce ideas off of each other. And there's always this inherent value in just being around each other while I'm going to grab water from the water fountain and I see you. I'm like, oh, hey, by the way, I heard you had a birthday last week. How'd that go? Right. And you have that small talk conversation. And it's like, how do we grab that just natural, organic relationship building and pull that into a virtual element of some type? Or maybe it's not virtual, maybe it is in person and they learn from me or they grow with each other. And I don't want to say team building events, because when you call it that and it's intentionally built as a team building event, there's a barrier where they're like, oh, I'm supposed to come here and I'm supposed to build a relationship with my peers.
Yeah.
It generally doesn't work as well as if they're like, oh, I meet with these people twice a week, every week at this one location. And, they might not know it, but if they show up on time, I always wait like 10 minutes to get things started. So it's just chit chatting and get to know and like talk about BS or whatever. So that is a very tricky situation, but I think you can, with enough fine handling, you can do pretty well.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So how do you stay ahead of industry trends? Now, there's probably things that are happening in your world, whether it's with advertising or marketing or even just a personal training. How do you stay ahead with with industry trends?
Okay. And honestly, it's not something that generally comes up. We try to make sure that we're always the professional that has an opinion on the subject, right? That we are someone that, as clients will ask us, like this year is a big thing, is Ozempic, GLP-1 inhibitors. These weight loss drugs is a question we get asked about a lot, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so even though we have nothing to do with it, it's not our game, we don't prescribe anything.
Yeah.
It is something that we need to have an opinion on professionally. And so just knowing that we are the point of contact, and that's something that can never be lost on us. And that brings the much bigger picture here of what we actually are. Mm-hmm. We're not people that you're going to see that help you get bigger biceps or help you lose 10 pounds of body fat. That's not our thing at all. Our entire thing of Corrective Fitness is to make sure that we're mobilizing each joint. We're making sure that you feel like you have longevity, right? So, but the most important element, that we're the person that everyone sees most often, other than their significant other. We're seeing these people 3-4 times a week. At some point, and when you're a few years in working with these individuals, you're the point of contact for almost all information, which can get kind of a little scary, right? They're asking advice for things. I have clients regularly come to me like, hey, here are my MRIs. Can you tell me what you think? I'm like, I'm not qualified to do that for you, right? But that tells you something. Is like, oh, these people trust us this much, right? So establishing that relationship, and is why we've actually grown other services. So to piggyback on that idea, are now, because we're the point of contact for all health-related information, and as long as, of course, I'm continuing to do my job, hire the right people who can be respected by these executive types, then we've decided to bring as why not offer more services in the same category, since they already come to us anyways. So now we do functional massage therapy is another thing that we bring to their house and help with there. We have a nutritionist as well that we bring to their house, and they can consult with a nutritionist. So we have a couple more on the way. But the idea now is all health and wellness under their roof, wherever they live, right? Mm-hmm. And since a lot of these are demo 35 to 45-year-old women with families, they don't want to leave very much. Just getting something as basic as a massage, drive 30 minutes, park, get inside, do the whole thing, drive 30 minutes back. That extra hour, really, if anyone, like your life, my life, is not something that we're looking forward to. So if we can provide all the services, right? So now we're expanding into this bigger category we don't necessarily have to compete against trends, the way you put it. We're not thinking about that. We just need to have an opinion on it, and just be aware of which industry is growing that we could provide in home.
Definitely. Yeah, I think it's very important to be a thought leader and, like you said, have an opinion on these things. So is there like a certain source of all this information? Like you're like, oh, wow, this weight loss drug is becoming popular, or this diet is becoming popular. How do you keep up with those things?
Well, that's what's great about having just like an SEO team, honestly. The SEO team, they don't do it directly, they do it indirectly. They're like, oh, we noticed that these specific keywords are trying to rank a lot higher. And I'm like, all right, well, let's see why those are. And we'll dig into it a little bit. And we're like, oh, it's because of this trend and this and this and this. So, and then we put a strategy around that concept, right? So let's say like Ozempic is a good example, because we just released this recently. Is like, okay, well, I'll write an entire resource article on this and on the subject. My nutritionist will do a very similar thing from the functional nutrition perspective. And then we will put out video content on the same thing. And like yourself, we'll put those bits of takeaways from the videos on our socials and whatnot. So it's just it starts with our SEO team, and then find those keywords, and then we put our article together, and then the video, and then the sound bites. And it's just like, yeah, it kind of builds out that whole strategy.
Yeah. So do you use a lot of social media to run your business?
Not as much as others, honestly. It is not my primary. It's always it's my afterthought, honestly. And that's not because it's not effective. It is incredibly effective. It's just our avatar isn't usually on social media that often. And if they are, they're not on very, very often. So this mindset of like, let's take you on the journey, because this is how I think about it when I'm thinking about my avatar, right? So these are individuals who have an MBA. We do work with a lot of consultants in town. That mainly because like either they live here and we turn them here, or they don't live here, they live in Chicago or Boston, they travel here for Dell or Microsoft consulting, or Apple, and so we train them while they're here, right? So it's just win-win. In any case, we think about their what is that journey, right? They get an undergrad, and then they go intern somewhere, and then they decide to go to graduate school, get their MBA. By this time, they're 26, 27 years old. Then now they're just they're not even junior partner, right? They're just an associate. That takes a couple of 2 to 3 years of they're hustling. By the time they're 32, 33, they're not starting to get that junior partner. Maybe they're already getting partner. And that's when life slows down a little bit for them. And by slowing down, I mean, there's not as much hustle, like wasted energy. There's this conversion of how hard they're working for their position, and where they are in life. And like they've gotten married, they have the kids, and now they just need to maintain. Now they're partner, now they have a family, now they're married, so that they just need to coast. And at that point, about 35, 36, 37 years old, across the board, you can ask any 36-year-olds like, hey, do you have low back pain? Like, yeah, I'm 36. It's like, so, and that's what happens to them. They're like, people who use a high achieving type A's, like, what happened? I used to be an athlete. Now my hips hurt, my ankle hurt, my knee hurt, right? And that's when we come in. That's the moments, right, in their life. And these individuals are not at a place where they're scrolling on Instagram, right? They've just finished hustling for the last 12 years of their life. And so even though we do leverage social media, mostly for our other products, because we do have virtual products for that, but for our main avatar, our main source of revenue generation is our in-person clientele. Those are the ones that we focus on. What do? They either ask their assistant, or they themselves will go, back hurts, need help, something, right? And then like, boom, there we are every single time. Yeah. And like, yeah, does your back hurt? This is how you rehab it, whatever. So qualifying ourselves that way. However, for our virtual services, we do have social media. We kind of leverage that a lot more.
Yeah. Awesome. I love that. I think you painted a really great picture on like who your perfect avatar is and how they're finding you. But yeah, okay, cool. So now as far as it like personal life, like how do you balance business and personal life? Do you have a work-life balance?
Ooh, I would be curious to see how other people answer this question. So I am married and I have twins. They're 4 months old. So do I have the balance? It's pretty all-consuming. My wife also runs a business. She has an events company. So side note, find yourself a partner who can help balance you, not just in a relationship, but also in your business if you run a business. It's someone I am more CEO type vision man, and she is operational 100%, right? She doesn't think about 10 years from now. She thinks about tomorrow, today, and what steps to knock off. So I get to balance that. So in a way, my work-life balance is balanced by the choices I've made by finding the right partner for me, where I can talk about my work and feel like I'm knocking things off my list or solving a problem that I'm having trouble with mentally by just talking to her on a date night kind of thing, right? Mm-hmm. And that has helped a lot. With the introduction of the twins, there's something that I was wondering if it was going to actually happen. Paul Graham of Y Combinator was talking about there's nothing that quite focuses and optimizes your time as having children. He made a joke about how I don't recommend you having kids just to optimize your time, but it has to if you want to continue being successful. And I didn't realize how true that was. Before I was like, okay, I have, 12, 14 hours today to knock out these tasks. And there is this, I wouldn't say a sense of urgency. There was a sense of urgency I thought I had back then, by knocking these tasks off. But I could stop, go take an hour break, go grab a lunch, grab a bite, and just think about things as I'm walking around town. I live downtown, so I just kind of like to walk around and think things through. Now it's like I have until 3:30 p.m. is when I take over for my wife so she can knock out some work for a couple of hours. And that's my absolute cutoff. There's no leeway on that. And watch the kiddos. And then she comes back and takes over and I finish up my night working. And in knowing that I have that, or at any moment that she's going to need assistance or something. And honestly, we have help as well. I don't make it seem like it's just us. But I like to, make sure that in worst case scenario, I'm ready. So categorizing like I have this time frame and this time frame, there's no leeway in that. I can't stay up later or do whatever, pull an all-nighter like I used to. This is all I have. Has really forced me to create these very specific buckets of time. Actually, again, our mutual friend who I learned it from, he's like, you really need to be stacking your day with just one type of work, right? As opposed to just knocking out little bits of everything every single day. And, I should have known this before and I heard, but I ignored it. But now as with kids, I'm like, okay, that makes sense. And that work-life balance I wouldn't say necessarily there. It's more of optimizing my time is what really I've focused on with having my personal life. And and I can think also do what everyone else does who runs a business socially is just hang out with your, business associates, knock out two birds with one stone. And so that would be the answer is really figuring out like, how can I get, how do I win in both categories all the time?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
No, yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So, okay. And what would you say is one investment in your business that has paid off significantly, whether that's time or money or some sort of resources?
I don't know. That's a tough one to answer. I can't think of one as significant than just overarching everything, but something simple, I would say, that is honestly a small investment, but it has yielded wonders to answer your earlier question about culture. Paying for the certifications of the team, continuing education, and making sure that we're doing it together in our meetings. Like we'll say, hey, make sure you read in chapter 9 through 10 or whatever, 11 of the specific license or certification. And then we'll talk about it in team discussion. And that small investment of continuing their education, it's one of those things where I talk about like knocks off for several boxes, like I was mentioning with work-life balance, where it's culture building. It puts them, they understand the vision of the company. Like, oh, we need to know more than everyone else, right? It just inherently suggests that, right? By constantly doing continuing education, because no other fitness company on the planet cares about continuing education. And not only we cover it, we go into depth on it. And so it's an element of culture building. It shows them what they need to know, that they need to be most qualified professional than more than anyone else on the planet. And honestly, it doesn't cost that much. Like it was like, it's like $700 a pop or something. And we just keep doing that. And honestly, it's small, but really helps on keeping people on track. Yep. Yeah. And invest in the business. And back to the thing when you say like, why don't they just run away with clients, right? It's like, that's another thing. It's like, oh, I'm getting free education, right? Yeah, I'm qualified professional. So
definitely. Awesome. Cool. Now, can we talk a little bit about the importance of networking and building relationships in business? How significant has that been for your company?
Absolutely paramount. My industry, it's very personal. Like you imagine if you're a woman who's 40 years old and having a male walk into your home 3 to 4 times a week, it's, you're in their space, in their world. So how do you get past that barrier is it has to be a recommendation from a friend of a friend or a friend directly, right? Business associate, someone they respect and trust. Mm-hmm. And so those referrals, something we rely heavily on. It's a tough pitch when it's like, hey, I'm going to be in your house, this 7 a.m. with the kids running around. It's like, I don't know if I'm comfortable with that, but if their friend, their neighbor, or someone says, hey, I have this person I've been working with for a year or two, right? So we know that going into this, it tears down that barrier, and having to make sure we don't do this simple like, oh, the referral process. It's like, no. We need to be around them. It's like, what functions are you at? Can I come with you? We do this networking stuff there's a consulting group here just a block from where I live, and they throw events regularly, and I'll show up to these events with them and meet the colleagues and coworkers and whatnot. So it is probably the most important element of what we do. We're in an interesting field where we have to have a high technical prowess, but at the same time, personality, right? They have to trust us and make sure that we're not going to, I don't know, burn their house down or something. I don't know. I don't know what people actually fear, but yeah, absolutely. No, it's the most important.
Cool. So that's like on the client side. Have you found business relationships and networking with other business owners or companies to be effective in growing your business?
Mm-hmm. We have gone through a few phases of working with other clinics, professional studios, whatnot, and it has never really worked that well. For a few reasons, depending on how you run the cross promotion and the relationship, you kind of cut into your margins a little bit more than you want to, and it's not that valuable. Or really, at the end of the day, is I don't think other companies, and something maybe it's more of an ego that I need to work over. They don't understand what we do, right? And every time I say the word trainer, people think, "Oh, I'm gonna do some push-ups." It's like, no, it's what I internally we call it lifestyle management is what we're constantly the term that we use. We don't say that because no one knows what that means outside of our company. So internally called lifestyle management because we work on 5 different pillars of people's health, and one of them is only fitness. The rest of them, aren't. So a lot of different elements. And when we work with these other partnerships, because they don't understand what we're really doing, they don't really promote us in the light that we want to be promoted in, right? And that mischaracterization of who we are is something that's important to us. It's a part of our brand. We're trying to develop a new type of fitness professional. Honestly, drop the word fitness. A new type of professional that comes into people's homes. And if we don't carry that properly, that branding, it'll never work in the marketplace, right? So yes. Is that kind of answering your question? Like, I know that the answer is no, basically, but no, it just really hasn't worked out. And besides, I say, of course, the financials generally don't work. But it's really it's a mischaracterization that I'm not really a fan of.
No, I definitely understand that. I mean, I've seen that in several different industries. It's like if you have something that's very specific and maybe hard for people to understand right off the bat, when they're partnering with you or referring people your way or doing something like that, maybe they can kind of misconstrue some information, and then that doesn't actually benefit you in the long run.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, no, it's very interesting. So in terms of competition, how do you handle competition, and what do you do to stand out in your industry?
Competition is, it's interesting because the way we're going through these questions, I realize it always ties back to the earlier points almost every single time. And I guess it should, right? If you're running your business efficiently. But competition goes back to how we branding ourselves. Do people understand what we're actually doing? So if competition is taking some of our market share, right, then we are doing something wrong. It has nothing to do with our competition, right? Because no one does what we do technically. Apples to apples, they don't do what we do. But of course, we have to bring people through the door with just letting them assume that we're just training them. So it's a lesson. It's a lesson every single time where people are taking market share, which is something it's kind of happened this past a year and a half or so in Austin. Austin's gotten big enough now that we're starting to see these kind of like companies that develop, or companies that were like in Portland or Seattle, like start to grow a division here. And it just lets us know, like, okay, where are we miscommunicating our branding? If they're stealing market share from us, true market share, not just like, people who are hiring a trainer, like a goal to 24-hour fitness. Like, that's not our competition. Like, we're not related to that crowd at all. Something I have to say a lot. We're not a gym, right? We're a personal training firm. So if we're losing true market share to our competition, then we are doing something wrong. It's not them. And we are always going to be the highest technical skill set professional on the market, no matter what. That's where we put all of our energy. We are going to offer services that some people, almost no one else offers outside of just our trainers. So we need to figure out our communication, our branding. It's something that does come up somewhat regularly. Every couple of months, we sit down and say, okay, what is happening here? Does this make sense? Like, okay, let's just look at this funnel we created, this strategy. Like, why isn't this working? And I don't mean that because it's not generating enough revenue. I just mean like, they didn't choose this over this, right? Where's the messaging lost? And again, this is everything ties back into my marketing brain, right? Like, it goes back to like, where's the messaging? Why are we not connecting to the audience? It's not the competition's fault. Just like it's not someone else's fault that you're not being successful. It's always on you. The buck stops at you every single time. Extreme ownership is a pretty important element of what we do. So how we handle it is we continue to work on ourselves. We find our own weaknesses. We see where we lost in the communication. And other than that, we don't worry about it because not to sound too arrogant, but at some point our competition will lose that client, right? And then we'll pick them up, right? We have our retention with someone who's already had another personal trainer in the past is phenomenal. It's like 5 to 10 years, depending on a few factors. But we kind of wait for them to, in essence, lose that client. Because I mean, and I shouldn't say lose is like they're doing a bad job. Everyone has a timeline of how long they work with a professional, generally, right? And once they see that our value is a little bit more per hour, but they see that how much we're bringing to the table, like, oh wow, we didn't even know that you could do all these other things, right?
Yeah.
And you're hardly charging more. Like you're replacing my somewhat replacing my physical therapist and my massage therapist and all these things, but you're charging like 20% more. I'm going to keep you forever, right? And that's generally the vibe in the clientele. So, I would say those 2 points: shifting our communication, making sure that we're not missing something, like connecting to our audience, and the other one is just wait for them to lose them so we can take them.
Awesome, cool, man. Well, hey, as we wrap up here, are there any last advice or words of wisdom you want to share with our audience?
Absolutely. So, I would say that, like Socrates, the quote, know thyself. Spending your 20s breaking as many things and just messing up as much as possible in your 20s to really figure out what makes you tick internally and then build a business around that, right? You can't pretend to be something you're not. This is an obvious statement, but you also can't run a business around something you think you are, right? So every element that makes who you are, that's what I was talking about when I was like where I grew up, what I did, and then how can leverage those things to make a company is paramount to success. And it took me the first business to realize that I was imitating people that I respected, and I wasn't pulling who I was to the surface. I wasn't digging deep and be like, what am I better than everyone else around me in, right? And I'm not talking about like skill sets, like I can throw a ball further or something. No, I mean, creative problem solving is one of my favorite things. I can sit and talk for days to people about like, oh, what problem you do with? Oh, you'd be cool if, and like, I just like doing that, right? And it's just fun for me. And like thinking, how do I implement that personality trait that I'm addicted to, that I can't stop doing, that you can't even get me to go to sleep if I have been up for days, if I'm doing it in that moment, right? How do I wrap that into my business, right? Yeah. And if you can find those 1, 2, maybe 3 elements, but really 1 or 2, there's no way you can fail because you can't stop doing what you're doing.
Yeah. Right? Yeah. Awesome. Well, Danny, thank you so much for joining me today. It was a pleasure chatting with you about business, and thank you all for watching this episode. This is Better Business with Austin Zelan, and we'll see you next time.
Take care, y'all.